Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My guest today is James Altucher. Hello, James. How you doing, dude?
Mark, I'm so excited to be here. I am a fan of the show, of course, and now it's an honor to be on your show.
Dude, I'm a fan of you, and I can't believe we've never met before, like sort of a couple weeks ago, right?
I know, and we were talking about we have so many mutual friends and mutual experiences going back to the 90s, like 30 years of mutuality.
Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. So I was going to talk about, well, let's just start off by saying you are now, well, you're doing several things, but one of the things you're doing is you're running a TAO treasury company, so sort of a MicroStrategy, but of TAO, called TAO Synergies, with a ticker of TAOx. And you put out a press release recently, or the company did, saying that you all had bought $10 million worth of TAO for your fund, which is great. But there was a quote in there from you, and it said, decentralized AI and TAO reminds me of the internet in 1996 or Bitcoin in 2013 or 2014. Really interesting, because I consider you to be like one of these harbinger people. You're sort of like Forrest Gump. Like if you're in the room, like something's going on, right? And it's in every
good or
moment.
Bad.
Yeah. So tell, why don't you run us through kind of your history for those who don't know, because it's a rich history.
Yeah, and so I have a computer science background from way back, but also and you know, I went to undergrad computer science, graduate school in computer science. So I was really early to the web. Like basically when the first web servers were out there, I got obsessed and was already making websites. I'm talking about like 1992, 93. My friends and I were already kind of making websites. And when I moved to New York City, I wanted to write the great American novel. I left graduate school. I spent years trying to write a bad novel, but maybe through that time, I put in my 10,000 hours of writing. So I've kind of had these forked careers. Like I've been in the finance. I
did not know you were a novelist also. That's awesome. That's awesome. Did you publish any of that?
I did, although anonymously, but I've published a lot of nonfiction books. So I've done a lot of what I call narrative nonfiction, maybe like, you know, I've written about my own experiences of making money, going completely broke, bouncing back, going broke again, making money again, and kind of going through all the experiences that happened along the way. And I did it kind of in a literary way as opposed to a self-help sort of way. And so I think the years I spent writing bad novels helped me for when I, you know, actually, you know, I've published about 25 books now, and you know, I've written millions of words, and so that's been a big part of my life is the writing side. But it brought me to New York City. I took a job at HBO, and what I realized when I got to New York City, and this is like 1994, is that there were maybe, and we probably knew all the same people, there were maybe 10 people who knew how to make a website, and I was one of them.
Yeah, and were you on the WAC list, WWAC? Worldwide Web Artists Consortium. You were on that list, okay?
Yeah, and there was a bunch of like early lists, like whether it was the Well in like California or you know
Echo NYC was the one that was on the East Coast.
Echo.
Which was being,
remember there was I think Echo was being hosted on Panix. Remember there was just all these early like internet service providers that you know I remember fondly, and you know nobody knew what this web thing was going to be. Like I really wanted it and liked it as a artistic medium, so that you know there was going to be 3D art, like instead of writing a novel, you could write a hypertext, you know, book. Like what would that be? Yeah. And so nobody knew it was going to be this commercial thing, right? So, but then at some point you realize, oh wait a second. Every single company on the planet is going to need a website, and zero of them have websites. Yeah. So then, and nobody knew how to make a website. So somebody like me, who was like dirt broke, didn't own a suit, had nothing going for me, but American Express needed a website. Here's $200,000 to make a website. Like I had no money at all, and suddenly, like people were paying me, and I had a full-time job. I was making an entire $40,000 a year as a junior programmer analyst at HBO, and then. My brother-in-law was like a designer, so I showed him this thing, the web, and I was a software guy. And so together we were doing like AmericanExpress.com. we did HBO.com. We did, all the record labels, all the movie studios in New York City. Like we did all of them because there was nobody else.
Yeah.
And so you felt it then. Like everybody was saying to me, oh, is this just going to be a fad? Is this like, what do you need the web for? It's just a bunch of academics. There's nobody really on the web. Like we have 10 million customers. What do we need the web for?
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who's a young person, sort of like early 30s, and I was explaining to them how they're now a big Tao person, right? And he's sort of confused why people don't believe it. I was like, oh no, the early web, nobody knew that this was going to be a commercial thing, right? Exactly what you're describing, right? Like you thought it was an artistic medium, almost like, I don't know, like Vermal or like the Vision Pro or something.
Oh, when
right?
Vermal came out, that was great. Virtual reality, markup language.
Yeah. So we didn't know it was a full on commercial thing, right? And then suddenly it became obvious, but it was not obvious looking forward. There's a lot of people who were like, the internet and the web is bullshit. We didn't even know. We thought maybe AOL or Prodigy was going to be what we later knew of as the web, right? It was not at all clear that the open web was going to win.
Well, by the way, and that's a good analogy. Prodigy was an example of centralized networking and social networking. And the web, of course, nobody really realizes the history, like how much the web changed. There used to be something called network programming. Like if you worked for a company like, I don't know, JP Morgan, if you're making an application that everybody at JP Morgan is going to use, you also have to write the networking software, like the networking interface. That all disappeared because the web became the only network. It was this decentralized network that connected, disparate computers and disparate corporate networks and so on. That's why it was this beginning of decentralization on the planet. And, but yeah, nobody really, it kind of came out of academia and the academics sort of resented the people from AOL being unleashed on the news groups on the internet and then eventually the web. Yeah. And all the academics were saying, we need to build Internet 2.0 now just to get rid of all the riffraff. But it was this, and you're right, everybody, even in 2000. So by 2000, I had already sold my company that was making websites, and I was in a venture capital. I was a partner in a venture capital firm, and it was 2001.
You made a big pile of money, and then
I did, but then I went 100% broke. Like I went from zero to $15 million. Okay, in 1998, I sold my company in 1998. 1999 was very good. Beginning of 2000 was very good. And I'm like, oh man. But I had like a sickness. Like I thought, okay, everybody's making 15 million. I have to make more than that. And I had a real, it was almost like a brain disorder. And of course, when you try to turn 15 into 100, it's much more easy to lose it than make it.
Yeah.
And there's three skills to money. There's making it, keeping it, growing it. And I was not very good at keeping it. And at that time, I had to really work hard to learn how to do that. I had, again, some sort of psychological issue almost. And
it's called being a degen.
Yeah.
We have a name for it now.
Yeah, right. And so but I remember though, before actually going completely broke, I was at this venture capital firm, and it was during the beginnings of the internet bust. And I remember just one of my, we were playing this arcade game I had in my office, Defender. And one of my partners, who was a banker, he lost the game on Defender, and he just hit the screen. He cracked the screen, and he's like, this internet thing is bullshit. And he just walked out, and I never saw him again. Like quit the firm, everything. And then I went broke and just lost everything, and that firm shut down, and I lost my home. I just went broke and had to start from scratch. Had to move out of the city and start completely from scratch.
This is after the dot-com bubble broke.
Bust.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's that, and then 9/11 happened. It was kind of like a 1-2 punch, as I remember it.
Right. And I literally, I had cashed out when I sold my company. I didn't sell for, I did sell for stock, but I cashed out of the stock. So I had cash.
Yeah.
And then I just lost it all. So I went from 15 million to about $143 in the bank. and I'm 143 is very specific, because I remember the exact same account that had once had that 15 million in it. I just had $143 left. I had 2 babies. I was losing my house.
God.
And of course, everybody's your friend on the way up. Nobody's your friend on the way down. So
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to die. And it was hard work and I thought also I'd won the lottery. Like, I didn't know anything at that time about business, but I thought I did. But it turns out it was just this big internet thing. And I just got lucky. And would I ever win the lottery again like that? And so it was very depressing and frustrating.
I do remember that 2000 to like 2005 timeframe as being very depressing, because we didn't know whether, like, startups or the internet was going to come back like it had been in the sort of late 90s. Like, it felt like that would never happen again, right? And we weren't really sure that it would.
And you're right, because like take a random year during those years, like 2002, 2003. Even when things were starting to tick back a little bit in 2003, still nobody really wanted to put their credit card in the internet. Oh, it was going to get hacked or stolen or whatever. I think the first time when people really felt comfortable, like, oh, this is here to stay, you said the year 2005.
Yeah.
And guess what happened in 2005? That's when there became 1 billion users around the world of the internet. And I think that was the tipping point for the internet. And I think a similar thing, by the way, is going to happen with crypto and Bitcoin. Like right now, about 2 years ago, I remember reading there were about 200 or 300 million users. And just a few weeks ago, I read there's about 500 million users worldwide of crypto. And a lot of that's outside the US, because it's people in Iran, for instance, that need dollars because eventually their currency is going to collapse. And people in Argentina were collecting crypto because they were where so it's outside of the US that a lot of these users are, although, at least half of it's the US. But that was the big tipping point for the internet. And it was kind of a tipping point for social media as well, that number, because, there was early social media, like if you remember GeoCities or whatever.
That was here in LA. Yep.
Yeah. And then there was Friendster, and then there was MySpace, and MySpace didn't quite hit 1 billion users. I think it hit, a couple 100 million users. And then Facebook was the thing that hit 1 billion users. And then social media off to the races at that point. It was like 2007, 2008. Yeah. And then, and then crypto starts 2009, of course, with Bitcoin. And around 2013, I was exposed to it, and at first I thought, oh, this is just a Ponzi scheme, Bitcoin. Someone had asked me on Twitter, what do you think of Bitcoin? I'm like, oh, BS, Ponzi scheme.
You know what I thought it was? Do you remember Flues from the 90s, FLO?
Yeah. What was that guy named? Bob Lesson.
Yes. And then Whoopi Goldberg did the commercials for it on TV, right? So for those who don't know, it was a centralized digital currency. And so there was a big server somewhere that kept track of who had what dollars. And the pitch was, go online and buy Flues so that you can use it online. And everybody was like, why the fuck would I do that? Like, I have dollars. Why would I use this thing, right? And I guess it was supposed to be some sort of like, precursor to PayPal, and that was kind of the pitch. But it never made any sense. It never took off. It was a big failure. When I first heard about Bitcoin, I was like, oh, this is just Flues again. I've seen this before. It doesn't work. I just didn't get that it was decentralized. That was my reaction to it.
Yeah. So I had a similar kind of reaction. And then I got an email from a friend of mine, Naval Ravikant, who was like, no.
Oh, you know Naval? Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, Naval, I've known for a long time. And Kamal, his brother, is one of my closest friends. And Naval said, no, let's sit down. I'll explain Bitcoin to you. And so this was around April of 2013. And I was blown away. Like, we just spent the day going over everything from the technology and the code to the tokenomics, the economics, the use cases, smart contracts, the whole thing. And he's obviously a very convincing guy. I was like, I went from being from dismissing it to being an evangelist for it. And I had a book coming out in June of 2013 called Choose Yourself. And I decided, you know what? Bitcoin is like this choose yourself currency. Like, nobody is forcing you to use it. You choose to use it. And so I made a Bitcoin only store, which sold one thing, which was an early release of my book. And I sold 60 copies, PDFs of my book from this Bitcoin only store for 1/10 of a Bitcoin each.
That is amazing.
60 people paid the equivalent of what's now $12,000 for a PDF of my book. And
wow.
And I went on CNBC to talk about Bitcoin. And I remember the guy on CNBC, the anchor, said, "Are you just doing this as a marketing stunt?" And I said, "Well, I'm on national TV right now, so it worked." so that was when I was starting to get into Bitcoin, but it was clear that it was early, right? It didn't have that billion users, didn't even have 100 million users.
No.
So it was not clear at all. And even when I was really advocating for it, I started a newsletter or a research service about Bitcoin in 2017 and 2018. People really were angry at me. Like, they did not like me for doing this. Like, the crypto people thought I was making it too simplified, and the non-crypto people thought I was scamming them. So
is this now, is this the thing that I saw all those ads for? Because that was my first encounter of you, right? So it had a picture of you, and it said "Crypto Genius reveals the next Bitcoin." Yeah. Dude, it was a great ad because it stays in my brain, right? Like, to me, it was like one of those classic all-time ads.
I mean, I think, and look, I have to give credit. Like, there was a company that, I mean, I didn't make the ads. I hated them. I hated being exposed like that. Yep. But somebody's explained to me that, listen, the scammers are actually using ads, and if you don't use it, and I was like, I don't want to do these ads. And they're like, if you don't use ads, then the scammers win. Like, they're the ones who everyone's going to subscribe to their research services, and they really are scamming. So Alain de Botton did this video. Nice guys often have to use bad techniques, because if you don't use them, then the bad guys who do use them will always win. And so I don't know. I use that to rationalize the ads, but it did work. And my point to the crypto community was, if you want widespread acceptance of Bitcoin, you have to be able to explain it to Main Street America. And that's what my goal was. I remember one time I was so frustrated. Everyone was just trashing me on Twitter because of these ads. And so it was 2 a.m, like on a Saturday night. And I put my phone number on Twitter, and I said, if anyone really has a problem with me, call me right now. And I ended up on the phone for the rest of the night, including with, I think it was Jackson Palmer, the founder of Dogecoin, called.
Wow.
And I explained to him, I really have good intentions here, but the only way I'm going to get this message out is by doing these ads. But actually look at the content before you judge me. I'm trying to explain Bitcoin so that people could understand it, so that Main Street America could use this. It's very important. You can't just go around hodling everything. Main Street America doesn't know what that word means. You can't go around talking about smart contracts and blockchain. No one knows what that means. Doesn't make any sense to people. So you have to show people that there actually is value here. There's 1 million man hours of code. There's billions of dollars of incentives, and electricity being used every year on this. You have to explain that there actually is real value. And and he, to his credit, Jackson Palmer, he got it, what I was doing. But, to this day, people still criticize me for those ads. But I was a believer. Yeah. And have been ever since. And I've been writing about crypto ever since, among other activities I do. And we'll leave out the part where I went broke, started another company, sold that, went broke again. And finally, hopefully I'm over the going broke thing. But, and then around 2018, I started writing actively about all the different crypto tokens that I liked, but you still had this feeling there wasn't really tokens. It was unclear, how would you know a token was going to be used or not? There weren't any users yet. So like Zcash, for instance, was a good idea. It was a good technology, but there weren't any users of Zcash. So
Zcash was dead end. But what did you think about Ethereum?
Ethereum, I recommended it around $300 to my subscribers. Ethereum, I liked. Basically, in 2018, the only things I liked were Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then it wasn't until later that I started to like, so for instance, Bittensor, I recommended to my subscribers in 2023 at about 49. Like, that seemed to me it was good.
Yeah, great recommendation. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, TAO's done very well, and it will continue to do well. Like, it seemed to me that was a good model. Like, I read that white paper, and I was, compared to others, I was late to TAO, but compared to many, I was early. But the white paper made sense to me. Like, provide an incentive mechanism for people to create, AI models or help others create AI models, and that seemed brilliant to me. So I liked Tao. I liked a few others. But look, out of the 2 million or so crypto tokens out there, maybe still only a handful are going to succeed. Tao being, of course, one of them, and a few others.
Right. So let's dive into Tao now because we're here. So Tao is this. I think of it as this sort of generalized incentivization alignment engine that's mostly used for AI projects, but not exclusively. But probably like 80-90% AI projects. And I think that it has the potential to eventually start beating the very large, very centralized companies, just as the internet beat AOL and Prodigy and all those things. And that was not obvious at the time. Just as Linux beat out OS2 and Microsoft NT, all those things, right? I think so too. We're in that movie in AI where right now the big centralized companies are winning, but this little kind of startup Tao Bittensor thing is booting up, and already it's showing massive success in the petri dish. It's showing that it's got teeth, and when this little baby shark, turns into a grown-up shark, it's going to start chewing through the ocean and ships and every other creature that it runs into. That's what it looks like to me. What do you see?
I see that also, but look, Mark, you're so knowledgeable in the space, so I'm going to ask you questions too, and I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. Obviously, I'm doing a deep dive in the space. My company just bought $10 million worth of Tao. Like we're going to be buying more and more. Like I'm neck deep in this. I'm neck deep in the entire ecosystem fairly quickly. Like even though I've been writing about it for years, it's maybe in the past 6 months that I've done the real deep dive.
Yeah.
That getting into all the subnets and the real mechanics of it. And I agree with you. And there's going to be challenges. Like take Linux. Linux is such a great example of open source, and open source has strong connections to decentralization. But Linux is a great example of they open sourced Unix. Unix was developed by AT&T. It was a corporate product, and Linux came along as an open source version. But no company was going to make a product using Linux. They needed it to be cleansed. So some companies were created, like Red Hat or VA Linux, to help cleanse Linux and make it. Their pitch to the IBMs of the world was like, you're not going to use Linux directly. You might get fired that way, but use us. We'll do what you need to do for you. We're the corporate guys who will fix Linux for you. And that worked. They were like the front door to Linux.
Yep.
And, I think Bittensor / Tao needs some of those front doors now. Like when I look at a lot of the subnets, I think to myself, this subnet is an incredibly good idea. In order to use it, why do I have to, put in my Tao public key in order to just use this as a consumer?
Yeah.
Like I just want to say, click, go, and have it work. Like, so, and I respect that. Like this Tao is at that point where it's like the internet in the 90s. It's like mostly technical people, or Bitcoin. Look, when I made my Bitcoin only store, even in 2013, it was technically very difficult to do. Nobody knew how to do it. I called Coinbase.
I can't believe you found
a
way to do it, to be honest.
Yeah, no, and look, I was a developer. I was a software guy, and I couldn't really do it. So I called Coinbase. Can you help me out? And they're like, nah. So then I called Fred Wilson. It's like, hey, you're invested in Coinbase. How come they can't help me? And Fred's like, yeah, they should be able to help you, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And so finally I found a developer to help me out. But Bittensor has a lot of, technical people starting businesses, and it needs now more user-friendly front ends. It needs more marketing. It needs more, consumer-facing or even corporate-facing. Look, if Shoots, for instance, is a great subnet. If I'm a dentist and I want to put my AI persona on my website, and I have kind of a bunch of things that are special about me as a dentist, I want to be able to easily feed that into Shoots, come back with like an AI widget that represents me, and put it on my website. But right now, to some extent, you have to be a little bit of a developer to do that. And I'm a dentist. I'm not a developer. So now I got to who am I going to call even? I don't know. I don't know what to do. So I just don't do it. Or maybe I use OpenAI, which is 10 to 100 times more expensive.
But I think with Shoots, so like the customer is the developer, right? In the same way the customer of AWS is the developer, right? The dentist is not going to use AWS either, and that's a mature product.
Right, but that's because consumer products had already been developed, like Dropbox and Google Cloud and Apple's Cloud and so on. Google Drive. But look, even like 19.ai, which is Subnet 19, where you can do text to image, and you can do inference, text inference. It's still, every time I go there, and I use that subnet quite a bit. Every time I go there, I have to figure out, where was it again? What's the right button to click? Like it's so. By the way, these are not criticisms of these subnets. I think these are two of many examples that are great subnets that have a lot of value, that they're undervalued at this point. But
no, I'm completely with you. And in fact, I've in previous episodes of Hash Rate, there's like maybe 5 or 6 of them where I make the same complaint about there being no front door. But I was more, and I use those exact words too. But I was talking more about like, how do I find my way to the subnets and what are they all doing? And
yes,
how do I buy
that's
them? That's
important too.
Yeah.
So there's TAOstat, there's Tao.app done by our mutual friend Joe Jacks. Like these are great sites, but still I want something.
They're not good enough yet. Even I love JJ, but not, even JJ's. Personally, I think Backprop has done the best job, but even that is not consumer enough.
And it'll get there. Like it reminds me of, again, we're talking really early internet. I mean, look, there was, I don't know what the World Wide Web worm was like the first search engine that Tim Berners-Lee actually developed. And then there was EINet Galaxy. That was a little bit of a search engine. I mean, these things were very early stage and they were just the beginnings of a front door. Google became like the ultimate, Yahoo was making first. A directory.
Yeah. It was like a list. I remember when Yahoo was like a big list.
And they weren't doing a search engine. They were making a directory. Yeah. It was just a big list. And that's fine. Like, okay, all these technologies need a front door, and it'll happen with like any problem that we talk about is an opportunity because BitTensor's already reached escape velocity, the way the web did once Netscape and Mosaic was around.
Yes.
But it still needs that really nice front door, or in the case of subnets, all the front doors, and it'll happen. I would encourage anybody listening to this website, go start a business. Anyone who starts a business, that's the front door. Either helping the subnets make their own front doors or just doing it yourself. Make the front doors to all these things. You're going to win. You're going to have a good, successful business. You could be like the Red Hat of Bittensor. It reminds me of, so what's the fastest growing DeFi exchange right now? It's Hyperliquid. And what makes Hyperliquid a little special? It has a very nice, user-friendly front interface. The Sushi Swap doesn't. Pancake Swap doesn't. DYDX didn't. And Hyperliquid crushed DYDX in the derivatives trading space. And so BitTensor is going to need that. And then again, which is also problem and opportunity. But then also there's another challenge, which is you have Facebook given $100 million pay packages for AI programmers, and BitTensor's incentives have to compete with that somewhat. And so I think the subnets, they think that magically, because they've got these, sub tokens they can use as incentives, that everything's going to work out. But you still have to think of incentives like a businessman thinks of incentives. Like, what are these incentives really? What are they really worth? How do you value them? Why should someone mine on your subnet and to get your incentives? Like, you still have to be creative with the incentives. It's not just about you got these tokens. So that area of BitTensor needs a little bit of work as well. Facebook knows what incentives they're using. Here's $100 million. Work for me.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, let me push back a little bit on that one because there was an interesting sort of thought that popped up on the very last All In podcast where Chamath was talking about something he calls the bitter lesson, and the bitter lesson is that what Elon did with self-driving cars is he just basically threw a bunch of GPU at it, just sort of brute force, right? Just insane amounts of GPU, insane amounts of data, and that resulted in the best self-driving car. and it wasn't really about the brains or the engineers. And the bitter lesson is that we don't matter that much. That really it's
Wow.
just the raw volume of compute that wins. So if that's true, right, and Bittensor is I don't know why I just pronounced it like Barry Silbert, but anyway, Bittensor is able to motivate at this time 10% of the GPU. So Bittensor has 10% of the GPU between, I guess, Targon and Shoots that Elon has in his first data center. And this is when Bittensor is a tiny little baby shark. It's like not doing anything. It's like itty bitty. So nothing has happened yet, right? Imagine when it's an all grown up shark and it's really big. It should be able to be quite a bit bigger in terms of GPU than all of Elon's and anybody's server farm. Just like Bitcoin is bigger than, in aggregate, the world's largest supercomputer by several orders of magnitude. It is the king of GPU. So,
Yeah.
right? You see what I'm saying? Like, it would suggest that that's where this is headed.
It's a really great point. So I'm an investor in one storage company. They build data centers for other companies, and I just asked them randomly, like a couple of weeks ago, "Hey, are you doing anything with this Bittensor stuff?" And he's like, "Funny you should ask. We're convincing our customers to be Bittensor miners by kind of leasing out their GPUs, their spare cycles on their GPUs for TAO rewards. We're building Bitcoin ASIC chips to optimize the GPUs that we're using to mine Bittensor, and we're selling these to our customers. So when storage companies like that are basically encouraging their customers might be like Verizon, with racks of data centers out there or racks of servers. So when this is happening, that was very encouraging to me, because the GPUs are going to get there, and then but also there has to be the software too, because there's other decentralized networks like Akash doing the GPU thing, but like I like how Bittensor mixes it up too with the software, but that also seems to be happening. Like it does seem to be happening. Like it does feel like Bittensor now has reached the escape velocity that the internet had in, let's call it 1995, or Bitcoin had in 2013.
Yes.
It's just that nobody knows it yet. It's
Yes.
not escape velocity for consumers. It has the escape velocity that, like, it's harder now to figure out how this will fail than how it will succeed.
Yes, very well said. Completely agree. My gut is everything. Every molecule of my being is like, oh my God, I've seen this like 3 or 4 times before, and it doesn't happen that often. But this is like one of them things for sure. I
almost wish it was not a crypto token, because it's different. It's decentralized AI. Like, decentralized AI is what we are saying is going to happen. It just happens to be built on top of crypto technology, which we know works as a decentralized, why reinvent the wheel? Bitcoin is the perfect decentralized currency. So here's TAO.
Right. Well, let's talk about the subnets for a second, because I'm just curious of your view of, we have these, each subnet, there's 128 of them. Each subnet has its own token, and that token is emitted into the subnet's liquidity pool in the AMM on the chain. If you don't know what I just said, that just means that basically it's making more coins that are exchangeable for TAO within the Bittensor ecosystem, right? So,
yeah.
Right. So, and we have this weird dynamic going on where the market caps of each one of these subnets are extremely low compared to their real world counterparts, right? So at one extreme, we have Ready AI, which is basically, I'm spacing the name of the company, Scale.
Is that Rayon Labs?
Yeah, Scale.ai. Ready. Yeah, so Ready AI, Subnet 33, is basically doing the equivalent that Scale AI is doing. Scale AI just got acquired by Facebook or Meta for $28 billion, whereas Ready AI, I believe their market cap last time I looked was about 10 million. So, extreme difference there.
When you say market cap, though, are you talking about the value of their subtokens?
Yes, I'm talking about the value of the circulating supply of the subnet tokens. I don't look at
which is not necessarily equity.
No, it's not equity. It's just they're just tokens, right? Subnet tokens. So there is one question, like, what are subnet tokens? Are they simply a meme coin for the subnet?
You just froze.
We should discuss that. But so there's that. I'm just talking about the dynamic of the market caps are really low. but the emissions are really high, right? There's a lot of dilution going on because the chain, the chain is in a very young state right now in terms of the subnet tokens. So it's it's making a lot of new tokens every day, which is diluting all the holders, right? So there's that dynamic that's at play. So we're in this. That's the state of play right now. How do you view subnet token investing? Is it smart to get in early right now to the right subnets, or is it just dumb and you should just stay away? And what is a subnet token? How do you view that whole world?
Yeah, this is the critical question of subnets, and the answers to these questions, which we're not going to fully be able to answer here, but the answers to these questions are going to be what define the future generations of successful subnets and companies that are built on top of Bittensor. But the issue is, you're right. What is the value of a subnet token? If, for instance, it's not equity in the company. Like the market cap of Ready AI is not 10 million. That's just the market capitalization of their subnet token. It's just like with crypto tokens. Sometimes, there are the subnet tokens, or sometimes the crypto tokens in the crypto world reflect the profits and revenues of the underlying blockchain and protocol. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's a little bit BS. Like Uniswap, which we know is one of the biggest DeFi exchanges out there, they have a token, UNI, and people are often fooled into thinking UNI is somehow correlated to the growth of Uniswap. UNI has does not benefit at all from anything that happens on Uniswap. It's just a governance token. They get to vote on issues with Uniswap, but that vote is meaningless because
I could say, James, that Tesla, the stock, you basically, let's just assume you don't get dividends. I'm pretty sure you don't. Back in the 20s, right? Back when in Top Hat days, you owned stocks because you're like, well, Charles, look at my dividends that I got from this company, from the railroad, right? Like that's why you own stocks. And then at a certain point, like that became not a thing or a very small thing. And you just owned stocks because you thought that the price of the stock was going to go up, right? But what is a stock but a meme coin for a company?
It's true, although there's the mythology that, okay, so like using Ben Graham or / Warren Buffett's view of a stock is worth the discounted value of all future cash flows, because eventually in some mythical future those cash flows all get returned to the stockholders, whether it's because they got acquired or there's a dividend or whatever. So there's still that mythology that exists, that's what a single share of stock is. It's worth this discounted future cash flows of a company. But with the tokens, and this applies to crypto as well, you have to do your due diligence. Like how is the company behind the token, the subnet in this case, how are the subnets really incentivizing people to want to own their token? So, and I believe Shoots is an example. Every dollar of revenue they have is used for token buybacks, so that increases the value of the tokens you own. It's not a systematic thing. They don't have to do that. They've decided to do that. I think it's better if they systematically do it. But a little bit of the problem there is Shoots might have $10,000 a month in revenues, but $500,000 a month in emissions. So it's still not enough to really incentivize. And by the way, I don't know if those are the exact numbers. I'm making that up.
Yes.
But but it's roughly something like that. They still have to come up with an incentive mechanism to make sure people are really incentivized to own those tokens. And I think there's not enough of an effort from these subnets at figuring out what the incentive. Maybe you attach equity to a token, but that's very difficult too then. And I think because then you get into regulatory laws, and I don't think the Open Tensor Foundation is really encouraging of that, which I understand.
Yeah.
So you have to really think about what these incentives are and how they can be used. And I think that's still kind of just like, okay, I'll compare it to the web in the 90s again. We don't really know that if one day Uber is going to be on the web or TikTok or whatever, like that this is just going to happen during the evolution of this decentralized thing we're calling TAO or Bittensor. That's going to be figured out by the most clever subnets. So we don't really know the full answer yet. And maybe right now there isn't one because it's so early, so miners are in there hoping that the incentives will be figured out, and the subnets are in there hoping that they're going to get more revenues, but they're still early stage startups, so it's not a requirement. And maybe they could figure out some way that, like AAVA is a crypto token that does lending. Well, just 3 or 4 months ago, they decided, okay, the profits from our lending, we're going to share with the token holders. And the AAVE token shot up as a result. So the same thing's going to happen with the subnets that figure out the right incentives. And the problem is a little bit, the subnets, and this is a big argument I see on Twitter, should people stake in root? Should people stake with the subnets? To stake with the subnets, you really have to do VC style due diligence. Are these subnets good companies or good services? And are they doing the right things for incentivizing miners? But then also, because it reduces the importance of the root subnet, you still got to make sure people are incentivized to own and stake Tau as well. So, root APYs have been going down because more staking's happening in the subnets. I don't know the correct answer to this. There's some, I think the free market will figure it out, but it's an interesting dynamic right now for subnets and for Tau.
Yeah, no, I obviously I agree. And I think that, I've heard you say that you think that some of these subnets will become multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yes.
So we agree there. Yes. So
look at Ready AI. Of course, I don't want to use Scale if it's going to cost me an arm. Like Scale spends billions a year to do what they do. So, Ready AI, the benefit of starting a company on Bittensor is that you have all these miners doing essentially for free work for you. They're doing it for the incentives you provide. But I would not, if I'm a young person in Oklahoma, I'm not going to be able to raise money from Silicon Valley VCs to start a $10 billion scale. I've got to use a decentralized network like Bittensor and Tau to start my company and build maybe even a better scale, because it's, not to use the word scale here, but subnets are infinitely scalable. They're not really dependent on how much money they've raised. They're dependent on how they get excited, miners and validators and then customers excited to do work for them. And so Ready could potentially be bigger than Scale.ai. And then are the subtokens worth it, or is it worth it to invest in the equity of Ready.ai? Like, is that an option? And so these questions are still being worked out, but definitely, companies like that, some subset of them are going to be multi-billion-dollar companies, and that's going to be a big tipping point for Bittensor.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think so. You made an interesting point, which is, if I'm a small developer somewhere, I can't really afford Scale.ai. It's expensive. Also, Meta owns them, so maybe I can't even get to them anymore, right? Because they're inside of Meta, right? Or I don't want them. I don't want to use them because I don't want them to know I don't want Meta to know what I'm up to and steal my idea, right? So, that's one problem. But number two, if I'm a small developer, Bittensor right now can supply me with AI training for my AI project for 1/20th to 1/40th of the cost of the sort of mainstream competitors. Why? Because the chain itself is paying the developers that are running that AI commodity for me, right? So
yeah,
right, like the company Ready AI doesn't have to pay their people. The chain pays them. The chain pays them in tokens, right? And some people are like, well, that's bullshit. You can't really, how is that sustainable? Well, that's exactly what Bitcoin does. It's literally exactly what Bitcoin does. It pays the miners in Bitcoin, and that works stupendously well. So so this model can work if the incentives are cooked correctly, right? So now you've got this world where the AI training is 1/20th to 1/40th the cost, and the inference is about 1/6 the cost. Oh my God, right? Like it feels like, why isn't everyone using this? Well, it goes back to what you said earlier about Linux. Nobody has sort of wrapped this stuff in a corporate, suit and tie, right? So everyone who, so big companies that would use this stuff at scale feel kind of, they're kind of weirded out by the fact that, it's this crypto free-ish thing, right? Like, what's the catch? They don't there's something suspicious about it, right?
But you're right though. Okay, that suspicion happened with the internet. That suspicion happened with Bitcoin, and it's happening here with Bittensor. But let's think of a real world use case. Now, I've never used Ready.ai, or Ready AI. So tell me if this use case is incorrect for that subnet. But let's say I'm a bunch of doctors and I've got 1 million patient records. But meaning a patient comes in, complains to me, and I write down their complaints with my handwriting, and then I make a diagnosis, and that diagnosis either turns out to be correct or incorrect. So this is the data I have, but it's written in notes of different handwritings, and it's different pharmaceutical data, whatever it is. Now I want to do something. I want to make an AI model that, given a new patient, I look at my 1 million patient records already, and the AI that has trained on them is able to tell me a diagnosis for the new patient. So maybe I go to a Ready.ai and say, hey, make this structured data. And then I'll go to Gradients, and I'll say, here's structured data, make an AI model. And now I'm in business. I have a business giving medical diagnosis for AI. These are like enormously powerful. If that's truly how these subnets are working, and if it's not that, I'm sure there's some subnets doing them, but that's truly powerful. If I can develop an AI company, based on using these subnets of Bittensor that are also kind of like companies, I think Bittensor has a $1 trillion value. I mean, it flips Bitcoin even.
Yeah. No, what you just described is in fact correct. So yes, and if the world at large sort of catches on to the fact that it can basically compose these subnets into just like DeFi Lego bricks snap together to make bigger things, so too do the Bittensor subnets snap together to make bigger things, just like your example. Once the world sort of catches on to that at scale, I do think that the horse runs out of the barn at warp 8, maybe warp 9.
No,
yes,
I agree. Particularly so let's take my example again. So it's a bunch of doctors who have 1 million patient records, and they don't want to spend $1 million on servers and networking and software developers. And by the way, let's use scale.ai to structure our data. It would cost them millions of dollars to really put this together. Plus, they'd have to know what to do. So they'd have to hire software people in advance of hiring other software people to help them even just plan the business. But with Bittensor, I don't even think it's 1/20th or 1/40th. I think it's like 1/100th or 1/200th the price, and in just a matter of weeks, as opposed to planning for months for a bunch of doctors to do what I described doing. That is such an enormous benefit. And you figure that, okay, Scale got bought for $28 billion. OpenAI is worth like a couple $100 billion now. I don't even know. So those are like the two companies that have to start off with, in addition to hosting my stuff on some servers and everything. So Bittensor can do this with companies valued combined less than 50 million or 100 million. So the fact that Bittensor is only quote unquote worth 3 or 4 billion is just ridiculous at this point. I think that's why we could easily see $5,000-$10,000 per TAO token shortly after the halving. The halving is happening on December 10th of this year.
Yeah.
But after the halving, I mean, something like 80 to 90% of Bittensor or TAO is staked already. So people are already long-term holders. There's hardly any TAO for sale. And I know this, having been in the market every day the past month or so. Imagine after the halving, where the amount of supply that's for sale each day is going to get cut in half, but the demand is going to go up because the more subnets there are, the subnets demand TAO every single day. So the demand's going to go up, supply is going to go down. Just basic economics, the TAO token is going to skyrocket. On top of the fact that if we manage to hit one of these tipping points, like someone makes a business and says, oh, this is $1 billion business because of TAO, or $100 million business because of TAO, it's just game over. Like it's $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 TAO. And I'm not trying to shill TAO. It's $200 million volume a day. There's nothing that you and I can say that are going to make the price of TAO go up or down.
Yeah.
But that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it does feel like It does feel like the very early days of Bitcoin. I mean, we keep coming back to that, but I remember Bitcoin bobbled around like, between $200 and $400, zipping up to like 600 or 650, maybe 700, and then back down again because it got scared. And it did that for like, I seem to remember like a couple of years. And then all of a sudden it just went up to like, 1,200. Then it sort of bobbled around there for a little while. And then it went to 5,000 and then 10,000. Like those hops happened pretty fast afterwards. And it sort of shocked everyone that sort of wasn't believing in it. And the difference now is that Bitcoin did not have all those rails built for new money to come in, or at least they were booting up slowly, like Coinbase and Binance and all the things that we know now were pretty new and just coming into being. Previous to that, there was like Mt. Gox, right? That was kind of it, right? And and some corner store guys. But here in the future, we have the advantage of a very robust crypto ecosystem. So those price jumps theoretically can happen a lot faster than they did for Bitcoin. So I think
and also don't forget for Bitcoin, if you were a miner, you had to sell the next day because you had to pay your electricity bills. Yeah. So and to this day, that's still true. But a Bittensor miner doesn't have to sell. So not only is the supply being cut, but there might actually, because there's going to be more demand, there might be more reason to hold on to your Bittensor. So the supply is going to the supply for sale each day is just going to be drastically cut as demand slow. And you don't need a lot of demand. You just need a demand to slowly go up. And it's going to have an astronomical effect on the price. Well, right now, I think most of the volume in Bittensor, to be honest, is hedge funds with algorithms, because, I mean, you have $200 million volume. That's not real volume. That's okay. Bittensor is so volatile. If you have some algorithmic approach to trading it, you're going to trade that with $200 million. So that's a lot of the trading already on Bittensor. It's not like real trading. So an uptick in demand is just going to drastically affect price.
There's another dynamic at play here besides the normal Bitcoin one, right? Where there's 21 million coins total, blah 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 blah. Unlike Bitcoin, where there was no use for it within the Bitcoin network, Tau is used frequently inside of the Bittensor network. You need Tau. You need to stake Tau in order to get subnet tokens, right? So in a sense, subnet tokens are just rehypothecated Tau, right? And if the subnet does well, the value is always driven back into the root Tau token. In order to create a new subnet, you need to stake some Tau. In order to be a validator, you need to stake Tau. In order to be a miner, I think you have to register with some Tau. Right, so there's use cases. There's Ethereum-like use cases inside of the Bittensor network, but at each point you're staking Tau in order to do something, which means you're bricking it and making it, not go anywhere. And that's a dynamic that did not exist in Bitcoin. So, oh my God, right, is what I see.
And even using the subnets as a customer, you have to pay in Tau. Now, I wish there was kind of a fiat front end to that, so I'm not aware really that I
Some of
need
these
Tau.
things do have those, by the way.
Yeah.
There are and they're starting to boot up the fiat front ends.
I think Hippias, the kind of Filecoin competitor, I forgot which subnet it is. I think they're doing a fiat front end.
Targon's got one too, I think. As well,
that's important.
Yeah, as well as I know that Shoots does now too. But the fiat front ends are actually pretty new. Like about 4 weeks ago, there weren't any. So
right, and that's going to happen. It's going to evolve fast, and then at some point, the investor community, which right now overlaps a little bit with the developer community, but at some point the investor community is going to realize, oh, this is real. This is something that's going to impact the real world. It's not just this project, and already we know it's not a project. There's 128 subnets performing valuable services, but people are it's going to be this realization all of a sudden that's just going to, I mean, we saw just in the past week, the price went from 300 to up to 450. Now it's around 410 or 412 or whatever. It's a very volatile crypto, but the next step is certainly a jump to 1,000. I can easily foresee that happening very quickly. Particularly it's going to move up in the run up to the halving. And then after the halving, it's just going to spike. Just the tokenomics are going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let me ask you kind of a crazy question now, and then I'll let you go because we're coming up on the hour. But before we go, so inside of the crypto universe, we saw Ethereum boot up, right? We saw Bitcoin came along, and then there was a bunch of Bitcoin clones, and most of them kind of didn't go anywhere. There's Dogecoin and Litecoin, but that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And then Ethereum came along, and that presented like a new kind of crypto. And we saw lots of things spring up around that, attempting to sort of steal the thunder from Ethereum, right? One of the more successful attempts of that was Solana. And Solana was a VC coin, obviously, famously, like something like 30 or 40% of it was like owned immediately by venture capitalists who booted that up, right? So the VC world saw Ethereum and said, hey, let's go make our own one of those, right? And then one we can own this time, right? And, do you think, and so my question is this, Bittensor appears to have created another class of coin and ecosystem. If I was a VC, I'd be looking at that going, hey, I like that Tau stuff. Let's go make ourselves one of them. Let's do like a Solana of Tau. How likely do you think it is that a well-heeled VC, an A16Z or somebody like that, could do that?
The problem is, unlike a lot of those other projects you mentioned, including Ethereum and Solana, Ethereum's almost a special case now after being around for 10 years. But Tau has a moat around it. Like, yes, it's easy. It might be easy to make another Tau 2, Tau Ethereum, whatever you want to call it. But look, there's 128 subnets and then a waiting list of people who want to build on top of Bittensor. You can't just hire people. Like, Bittensor is not just the token. Bittensor is the network. It's got a network effect. Solana and these other, okay, let's say I'm BlackRock, the big financial institution, and I want to start tokenizing real estate. Okay, well, I can use Solana, but maybe I can also use Avalanche, or I can use Hedera. There's all these layer ones that have similar functionality with small changes. I could use any of them. There's not really a moat protecting. There's tiny moats depending on per token. But Bittensor has this network effect. What if I told you, hey, Mark, for $10,000, I'll sell you a complete clone of Facebook. You can make another Facebook, and Facebook's worth $2 trillion. You would say, no, it's not worth $10,000 because the clone has no value. The network had the value. It's the Moore's law. And not only that, Metcalfe's law, sorry. And not only that, Bittensor is a network of networks. So every subnet has, sub-subnets.
Yep.
And it has its own ecosystem. So that there's something called Reed's law, which is like an exponential version of Metcalfe's law. Maybe I even saw someone talking on your podcast about this. I'm not sure.
You did.
So
you did.
Yeah. So I forgot who was talking about this, but
Mike Grantis. Mike Grantis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just repeating what's already been said that I learned on your podcast. So give full credit to where it's due. But I believe it. Like that is a huge moat. That is, I don't know how you would create another. You can't create a duplicate of Bittensor because how are you going to get the network? How are you going to get the 128 subnets and all the people who are already using those subnets? There are customers now who depend on shoots and who depend on gradients and these other and Ready AI and so on.
Yeah, it's achieved enough scale that it's got escape velocity. I agree with you on that. And I think also it was born correctly, right? So Solana was sort of born dirty and everyone kind of knows it. And
by the way, Solana hired a head of marketing. They took what Netflix's head of marketing and made their own head of marketing. And I give them full credit that this woman started hackathons, Solana hackathons, and started sponsoring things. Bittensor or the Open Tensor Foundation doesn't want to do that because they really believe in the decentralized ethos. But again, some front end person in the ecosystem will do that. Maybe me,
yeah.
Someone like me will do that, and that will work.
Yeah, well, they definitely need some help, and I'm glad I'm putting my shoulder at the wheel too. I'm with you. I'm a true believer. So I'm here for the long haul as well. So James, this has been an awesome hour. It's always like super fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Mark. Same here. Like let's do it again. Like I always learn from our conversations. You have so much knowledge that and I always listen to the podcast. That's why I got to be careful when I come on here, not to just repeat what I heard before on here.
No, dude, this was great. This was like 90% new stuff to me. So thank you once again, James. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. We'll see y'all next time.